Uh, no, I'm serious. Reach out. My DMs are open. And I'm not necessarily saying I have the right answer, but I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to chat. Um, the author life is not for everybody. The writer life is not for everybody. That is true. But if you feel like you've hit a wall, if you feel like you're on the edge or some other metaphor of giving up, before you do that, if you've watched this episode and you've seen David and me do a bunch of these episodes and whatnot, reach out at least to me. I can't make Dave's DMs open, but he'll find.
You can DM me.
Yeah. Hey, this is Writers Row. I'm DC Wright-Hammer.
I'm David Gane.
And if you like what you've been seeing on this show, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Comment down below on any thoughts that you have, and if you haven't subscribed and hit that notification bell, make sure to do that as well.
So what are we talking about this week, DC? We don't have any guest host or guest stars on this one.
Are you sure? Can we look around? No guests?
I guess I don't know where to look because we never know where they're going to show up on this.
Right, exactly. So. That's for people who are wondering, that's Skype's fault. I even emailed support and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like a great feature. We'll think about that." So for people who are wondering, if we could always put the guest in the big slot, we would, but it's arbitrary. So
we want to give the guest the big head.
Right. So if you want to come on Writers Row, we try to give you a big head on Writers Row, which sounds very weird. We're going to just move on now.
Yeah, you went there. So what are we talking about, DC?
So being on writing community for over a year now, occasionally you come across the writer who is ready to throw in the towel. Somebody who they might be querying, or they've been querying for years. They might do the indie author route and run into the troubles that come with doing the indie author route, whether it be just finishing their book, getting their book out there, marketing. Writers can get overwhelmed. In the end, we probably would spend most of our time just writing if we could, but there's other things involved. Even if you're trying to go the traditional route, you're querying for an agent. Then once you get an agent, you're still working out the manuscript and you're looking for them to get you some kind of contract. And so it can be very overwhelming, and trying to maintain a whole other life with that and trying to push our writer dreams forward. We wanted to do an episode basically, if you find yourself or somebody who is on the edge, watch this before you give up, basically, is kind of what we wanted to put forward. So
is that what we want to put forward?
That's what I want to put forward, David.
Okay, we'll see.
And so I could share just my experience. I mean, I think I kind of was very frustrated going into my second book. I had written 2 books in about 18 months, which is a lot of writing really fast for the long novels that I had, or the relatively long novels. And I didn't know how to do the marketing side of things, and it was daunting. And that's when I hit my dip in writing. Like, I kind of just fell off a cliff. I wrote 265,000 words in 18 months, and to do all the editing process, enough to publish 2 books. And I just kind of I fell flat, and I started doing the marketing thing on Twitter. But even to this day, my writing is very inconsistent. One week I'll do 2,000, 3,000 words maybe, and then the next 2-3 weeks I might not do any. And there was a certain point, I think, probably before we started this show, where I was like, is it even worth it? Like, is it, I've got 2 cool books out there. Should I finish this series? Because it's a lot of work and it's exhausting, and, the return that you're looking for a lot of times is in like monetary, like, hey, I put X amount of time and money and effort into this. I want to get some of that back. And when you don't see that consistently, it can be very challenging. It can be very, it can just kind of break your spirit. And so I've seen others out there who kind of will hit a wall. And I wanted to have a show where at least I could put forth, um, some food for thought before they might go to some extreme or something like that. So,
And by extreme, you mean just giving up entirely? Or are we talking something where it's like delete the entire file of whatever work in progress they've got going on? Or
yeah, and there was even there was somebody on Twitter who was saying that they couldn't even donate. They had a ton of paperbacks that they had purchased for themselves, and they couldn't even donate them. Nobody wanted to take them, so they were just going to burn them in their backyard because they were tired of looking at them at their house. And
really?
yeah, and so examples like that are, extreme, but I could see how people could get there. I could see how, yeah, um, in addition to all the other interpersonal stuff we have going on, there's this thing that takes up space. These books are taking up space. Maybe I didn't do a good job of marketing or whatever it is, but it's a constant reminder. It feels like a constant reminder of, at least, not being able to move those books. It feels like a failure to some extent, like that they're just sitting around reminding you of, oh, yeah, I tried to do that author thing and I just couldn't cut it.
See, and the interesting thing about that is when we got into this, I was just thinking we were talking about doing the writing, but you're talking about doing the selling and the marketing of the books too, right? So there's, and I think that's a good place to start off, which is it's when we get into this business, we're like, oh, I just want to be a writer and
Right.
do it that way. And if you're an indie or you decide to take the indie path, even a little bit, like a lot of people will do the split, a bit of both nowadays. But once you do the indie path, it's not just simply throw it up on Kindle or Amazon or Apple iBooks or whatever. It's, you got to somehow get people to find it and pay attention to it and everything like that. And yeah, it is daunting, especially when you're not even realizing that that's what you need to do to begin with, which
Right.
I think is kind of the idea that I was starting with when I started talking. Because yeah, we when we think about writing, we think about doing the writing, not the selling and the marketing and stuff like that. But if I guess my question is what is the other option when a person is there? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, so and again, broadening it to, let's say you got your 50th rejection letter because you've been querying. So you're not even to, the point where you're getting published. You're trying to go the traditional route, and you just, something. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Um, I think there's a lot of things that you can do. I think number one, I think definitely give yourself a little bit of time to start. Um, you know, get just a breathing room from whatever it is you're doing. If it's marketing that's frustrating you, if it's lack of sales, if it's you can't get this one scene written exactly the way you want, so you feel like it's writer's block, which we had an episode on. Um, so you've got whatever, and just give yourself a little bit of space. And I think one of the things that I've mentioned on this channel and I'm a big advocate for is reevaluating what your goals are and reevaluating what your definition of success is. I think that it's easy to lose sight of goals, and it's easy to look past simple victories, simple successes, if you've got this long haul that you need to do. If you're writing a 125,000 page novel, and you get stuck on 70,000 words, it can feel very daunting to get the last 50,000 or so words pumped out. And then you still know you have to do the editing process. You've got this long haul in front of you. I think, keeping your goal in mind, but giving yourself credit for those little goals that you make along the way and feeling like completing that next page, that next chapter, writing 500 words, writing 100 words, little something is better than nothing. Um, and just again, giving yourself a break and giving yourself space to be able to see that, kind of pulling yourself away from what's bringing you down and thinking about the things that you really have done. I think just setting goals is success in and of itself. People that are committing to NaNoWriMo right now and saying, I'm going to try, I think in and of
next month.
But they're committing to it.
Yes.
Right now. They're coming up with ideas. They want to write 50,000 words in a month, and they're saying, I'm going to put my name down. I'm going to write down this goal. I think that's success. Yeah, if they never did anything with it, it's kind of just a little piece of success. But I still think it's bold, and I still think that's an approach people should take. Write down a lofty goal, and then see how far you can get with it.
But in terms of that, a couple of questions or a couple of thoughts I have is when you do whatever your goal is, make sure it's clearly defined, right? Just know what that finish line looks like. And then even if it's a lofty goal, or especially if it's a lofty goal, what are the small victories that take you towards that, right? Because my my fear is always like there's the first step of just, okay, I want to go write a book. Once you finish writing the book, then that's a success, and you should reward yourself for it, I guess. Mm-hmm. But then whatever the path you take with it, whether it is going the indie route and selling it that way, or you want to go find an agent and doing that, and it's not the end of the journey either, right? And then you have to get it published, or you got to get it to a publisher or publish it yourself. Mm-hmm. And then you have to sell it and everything like that. And then the other thing, and I always see this on Twitter, and I always kind of shy away from the question is, somebody always is like, yeah, you make that big book sale, or you sell to the big publisher, and now they're giving you the money and it's become a bestseller, and that's really wonderful. But I even want to know, what is the definition of success in that? Like, is it about selling the book? Is it about making the money? Is it about fame and fortune? Or fame, I should say, since the fortune is the money. But even that idea of the money, what is your definition of success there? Is it you're paying the bills finally, or you're surviving on the writing itself? Or is it, you're a millionaire and J.K. Rowling's whatever millions or billions she's got? I don't even remember anymore.
She donated herself out of being a billionaire, I think is what I remember reading.
Oh, my.
Don't fact check me on that. I think I just, cursory read of news, because that's what we do nowadays. I think that people need to be open, and they do need to think about what success looks like. And I'll give you an example. At a recent book signing that I did, I didn't sell a ton of books. I sold a few. But the coolest thing happened at this book signing. Well, two really cool things actually happened. The first one was that this 12-year-old girl and her father approached me, and they were staring at the girl was staring at me like I was a celebrity, and I didn't know what was happening at first. And she points at my book and she says, "My friend says your book is really awesome." And I was like, "Oh, I have no idea who this is."
You didn't know her friend either, right?
Well, I asked, who's your friend? And she told me her name. I'm like, I don't know who that is. But I'm like, okay, so you were interested in buying a copy? And she said yes. And my books are not young adult. They're maybe new adult or maybe older than that. And so I looked at her father and I said, it has some mature content in it. I wanted to be open and honest about it. And he pulled the dad card of like, she reads everything anyway, and she's really interested in this. So I was like, this is like okay, it was just one sale of one book, but that was moving that somebody had a conversation about my books, and that was enough to get this, maybe 12-year-old girl to bug her dad to come down to the bookstore to buy my book. That's cool. That's success. Um, that's a little piece of success, and it's not going to pay the bills. It's not going to keep the lights on. It won't, you know, but it's a weird feeling, and it's really cool. I had at the same signing just a little bit after that, a member of the writing community showed up to call my bluff on whether I would buy her a beer or not, and I totally did. I took her out. We talked about writing. We talked about her path as an author, like, and that was super cool. Like these small pieces of success that I would never have if I hadn't put myself out there as an author, if I hadn't put myself out there on Twitter to help others and to work with others. And so I think that's it. You've really got to think about not just success in the form of like monetary or sometimes it's recognition, sometimes it's just really cool people come into your life that otherwise wouldn't be there because you chose this path. And so that's kind of some of the things I want people to think about is success and reward can look a lot different. Keep your eyes open for all of it.
And a lot of the like, I'm pretty sure that you weren't like hoping to have somebody that like a teenager come and say, "Hey, I've heard your book's cool. I want to buy it." Like that's not something you built into your success goal list, right?
Right.
So,
It'd be
uh,
really weird if I did.
but yeah, the reason I bring that up is that because a lot of the things that kind of come into our lives because of this work, we don't really consider as a part of it, right? It's you know for getting the nominations has always been really nice, but then a part of me is I really like even just going to an award ceremony and meeting other writers and having a good conversation with them and or even just saying, "Hey, I really enjoyed your book." Somebody that I've competed against for a thing.
Yep.
To me, those are little things that I never really would have thought of, but now I really enjoy, and that's actually something that I look forward to now when we get those opportunities. Um, uh, and there's like I'm thinking about the book sales and stuff like that, and also even you mentioned just going and doing the book sales, getting yourself to do that, and it's a tough thing to do, and kind of bringing it back to that idea of don't give up. You know, it's the one thing that I found when we were struggling a bit for a couple of months. I'm like, okay, then the thing that we need to do is start showing up at least one pop up of selling our books somewhere in town
Hmm.
each month just to try and do it. And then when we do it, we would actually say, okay, so, you know, this is where we are at. This is how busy it is. Let's pick a number, 10 books, 20 books, whatever, and hopefully sell that many books, right? And then it becomes a bit of fun for yourself too, where it's like, oh, how do I make my those extra sales and stuff like that. So I think those are good activities for you to be aware of, is defining the goals that you want, um, and then trying to figure out what actions you can take to get to those goals, even when it's tough and it sucks and you're kind of like you're feeling really exhausted. But I really do like the idea what you said early on, which is taking that time to step back and not to, I guess I would say, recharge, right? Recharge before forcing it. But I do think um, just being persistent is such a it's such a good strategy. It sucks, and rejection sucks, and feeling like you're spinning your wheels sucks. But persistence is like the thing that I think um, can definitely make a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah,
persistence and relevance, I think, is the two things that you should strive for. That you're constantly doing things and your name and your books are floating around. And your sales are going to go up and down with relevance. And you'd be surprised that if your name and your books are out there, you'll see spikes here and there where like two or three people are talking about it at the same time, or you make two or three sales here or there just randomly. You weren't necessarily putting forth all that much effort. So I think, yeah, staying persistent, but persistence can have breaks. Like you can put things in motion, be persistent, and then I think taking breaks, it's different than giving up. You know, taking 2 weeks off to recharge is fine. That doesn't mean you've given up or that you've failed or that you've missed any. You know, if you set deadlines, obviously, you know, you want to meet your deadlines, but take those breaks. And I think, you know, the other thing that we haven't really talked about in this episode is find your support group, whoever that is. If it's writing community, if it's your friends and family, if it's, you know, meeting strangers at a coffee shop, you know, sparking up conversation because that recharges you. If you're like a you know, extrovert,
extrovert.
and you really like to just meet people, and that kind of, you know, one thing leads to another. You might mention that, oh yeah, I write, and then they talk, you know, you have a good conversation about it with a stranger, this neutral third party. You know, rest and recharging come in a lot of forms, and sometimes you need to separate yourself. You know, other times, like you had said in the writer's block episode, write the damn, you know, sit your ass in the chair and write the damn book. Like sometimes you just need to hear that too at the same time, where you've been struggling with it and you're recharging is in fact recommitting yourself to whatever the goal is. And sometimes that means ironing out the things that are going on in your personal life first. And so you're taking a step back, ironing out, so then you can allocate more resources, time, and effort to writing that book. And then other times it's everything has to wait. I need to write this book. So again, recharging, taking breaks, or recommitting yourself. I mean, there's a lot of options on the table there. And if you take like the term giving up off the table, if you just say that's not an option, so if that's not an option, what are my options? You start to see the things that you could be doing that might help you. I'm not saying you take it off forever, you know, giving up, whatever. We can talk about that. We can, you know, shift gears towards that eventually. But I just think the idea of saying, I can't give up, so what are my options? Sometimes that opens up paths for you. It might mean taking a break. It might mean reaching out to a friend, or it might mean buckling down.
The other thing, though, is, and smarter minds have told me this, is that willpower is a finite resource. So if you are requiring a lot of willpower to be persistent in whatever part of your journey you are doing in the writing, it sometimes that's when you, like, if you've burnt your willpower out, then you do definitely need to step back and recharge. Um, and that's okay. But I'm gonna go into this now. Like, when should you give up, DC?
Um, so that's really everybody's choice, right? Um, I don't ever plan on giving up,
Okay.
personally. I like the idea of steadily writing, steadily building my author presence in the world, um, and maybe seeing this as a sunset career, you know, after I have worked, you know, and it'd be nice if that was sooner rather than later, my second act career, where I could sustain a comfortable lifestyle doing this author work, working with other authors, readers, doing writing stuff. That's the ideal, right? Like to be able to do your passion full time. Um, but I'm content, and so I think this is the other side of it. Building in sort of negative goals to some extent. Basically, you can check a box and say, "Yeah, I was prepared for that." And if it happens, that you're not totally crushed. Basically, if my books never take off, I check that off my, yeah, I thought that could be a thing that would happen. It happened. But in acknowledging that and not giving up and keeping my books relevant for the rest of my life, I feel like there can be a much greater level of success over the long haul, 20, 30, 40 years. Um, and so, you know, getting your first rejection letter, that's a goal you can check off if you're querying. Having a beta reader not like your stuff, check that off your box. Like if you build in these, what I call negative goals, they're not so crushing. Like you've thought through them, and yeah, there's going to be a little bit of get your first bad review on Amazon. Yes, check, got that one. It's like
You say the first review. I want to say like the 50th or the 100th. Only because,
bad.
yeah,
Well, but
because
you got to
especially
start
if you're
somewhere.
putting out, you're doing queries and stuff, and you're just like, okay, let's just do it and gather up my negatives because then that gets me closer to the positives or something like that, right?
Gets it out of the way. You got to start somewhere. Your first, fifth, 25th, fifth, whatever. Make your own negative goals and own them. Like it sounds strange, but I've been playing with that concept and it's relieving. Oh, I went a week without writing. Check that off the box. Now I don't have to stress over it. It's like I did it. It's over. Now I need to get back to writing. Like, um,
I'm
I,
I'm liking the idea of like being annoyed when you get a non-rejection. I don't even know why I called it non-rejection, but um yeah,
right.
you're like somebody accepts your work, son of a
On the
bitch.
first try.
Yeah, this wasn't supposed to be this way. Actually, that happened to me for something else where I was like, okay, next 5 years I'm going to be doing this thing, and then trying to get a job out of it, and then I got a job in the first year, and I was like, okay, well that didn't work out the way I'd planned.
Right. I just like to play with it. It's a psychological game almost to help you think about bad things that can happen, and you're just ready for them to begin with. I think there's a lot of anxiety that can go along with, trying to go after your author dreams. And I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Like when you release your next book, maybe you put your goals really low, for that book release. You should work really hard and be prepared and watch our episode on being prepared for a book release. But like set your goals really low and then you're not so distraught. Yeah, it's still going to not be fun. But guess what? If you've owned it up front and said, yep, I thought I would do poorly, not self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, you should put in all the work and effort. You should go, all out. But you've got two goals. One is your negative goal, and one is your positive goal. And if you hit either one, all right, hey, you're doing something. And then learn from it. That's the other thing too. I think the first time you do like a Facebook ad or something like that, trying to advertise your book, and it's a flop, you spent $20, you got 60 clicks, like maybe one purchase out of the whole thing, and you're like $18 in the hole. It feels bad. But the next time you read a book on it, and now you know how to do Facebook ads a little bit better. And so these stepping stones, it's like science. You fail to become successful eventually. And so I guess that's kind of what I'm talking about with negative goals is give yourself some stepping stones, give yourself some leeway, especially early in the process to fail in order for you to succeed later.
Okay, let's push this to the end though. When should you give up? Uh,
Hmm?
is there a point where you give up? Like I'm gonna say, if you're not having fun at all,
Right.
and doing the writing is painful or doing the selling is painful, I feel like you should at least consider that this may not be for you.
Yeah, I
And
think
I think we talked about this in a previous episode where I feel just I just feel like some people think that writing should come easy. And I don't agree with that, right? Like we have to do a bit of work. Just because we can write, we know the English language doesn't make it just an
right.
easy process. You have to
I agree.
struggle for it. But if you're not willing to do the struggle, and that's fine, because you may want to do other things with your life, right? Then don't feel bad if you do choose to say, oh, wait a second, writing isn't the thing for me. Or, you know, being an indie author is not the path for me. I need to change this up and do something different. It's, I don't know, sometimes I fear that some people commit too much.
Yep.
Like there's always the balance of some people want to give up where you say no, I want you to keep going. And then there's some people who are like, no, 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 I want to do this, but then they don't do anything and it's all painful for them. And I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? Maybe this isn't the path for you.
Yeah, if they have an unhealthy relationship with writing or becoming published or being a published author, um, you know,
Whatever things that you have to do in that process, right?
right. Um, I think it goes back to success and goals. And maybe they set some goals and their definition of success is too lofty. Maybe they would be much happier just writing a story and saving it, and no one ever sees it, and that's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
that is a good outlet for people because it gets them doing things. Doesn't mean that no one ever has to see it. It could be almost like their stories, their diary of stories, basically, to some extent. Um, I just not feeling like you have to fit in, not feeling like you have to go a certain route or a certain path. So I think, not to dodge your question, but before you give up, um, consider, other options. And if you want to be an author, then that typically means becoming published. I guess that's the difference between a writer and an author, right? Is that the delineation? Um, I'm not sure, but you can be a writer um, as a hobby. You can, whatever it is. So when do people give up? When if they have an unhealthy relationship with writing, I think is a good way to say they at least need to take a long break and figure out what's going on. And if they've set too lofty a goals or they set goals that they're not willing to put in the effort to make happen, then they need to either scale it back or change their paths, change their definitions of success.
Fair enough. So are you giving up, DC?
I'm gonna give up on giving up. Just take that off the table. No, um, no, but for real, anybody who's still watching this episode at this point,
And
um,
haven't given up.
and haven't,
Given
right,
up in
which
writer's
based
grove.
on our YouTube numbers, most have. But anyway, uh, no, I'm serious. Reach out. My DMs are open. And I'm not necessarily saying I have the right answer, but I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to chat. Um, the author life is not for everybody. The writer life is not for everybody. That is true. But if you feel like you've hit a wall, if you feel like you're on the edge or some other metaphor of giving up, before you do that, if you've watched this episode and you've seen David and me do a bunch of these episodes and whatnot, reach out at least to me. I can't make Dave's DMs open, but he'll find.
You can DM me. I'm
Yes,
not as often on Twitter
yes.
as DC, but I
But
do respond.
yep. So, and let's talk through it. Maybe you do just need a support system, or you need to think about different approaches, or maybe we come to the conclusion that you need a long break. Okay, it doesn't mean you've given up, and you might determine in that break that you do want to walk away. Fine. or you might come up with a new approach. So,
and it's okay if you do.
it is.
I think the one thing that we haven't stated enough is that it is okay to give up. That's not a bad thing.
It is.
It is.
It is.
If it's not your thing, then don't hurt yourself by trying for it.
Right. Exactly. And
Okay.
with that, I think we can wrap up this episode.
Okay. The cat has appeared in the background, so
That's good.
all right. What do you want to plug, DC?
I'm actually going to plug, and I'm going to tell him that I plugged it, but my high school English teacher is also an author, and he wrote a book called, it's hard to see.
It's not going to work.
It won't work.
Ghost story. Something,
it's
a
called
ghost story.
Resisting Gravity, a Ghost Story, and it's a contemporary story about a widower who's trying to move on with his life after his wife passed away, and he meets up with this apparition, this boy from basically an older century, and they develop a relationship that is very interesting. And it was a really great read. I actually read it probably 6 months ago, but it still sticks with me. It's very flowing prose, the story, even though it's just between this man and this apparition, and there's a lot of supporting characters, it feels very important. Like there's no like global conspiracy and nobody's life is in danger, and yet you find yourself really invested in the story. So wanted to give him a plug. I'll put the link to that book in the description down below. So if you like contemporary stories and stories of grief, it's a really cool little book. You'll probably read it in a day or two. And I've read and reviewed it because it was fabulous. So people should definitely take a look at it. My teacher's name, his name is John Bollinger is the actual author's name. And I had the pleasure of taking him freshman English in high school. So that was really pretty neat to read his book. He's read my books. And so pretty awesome stuff there.
Awesome. I'm going to be self-serving again and tell people to go to kunyosanggane.com and sign up for our newsletter, where we share all kinds of Kunyos and Gane stuff as well as other neat, fun things.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, DC. Have a good night.
Thanks, all you guys. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.